In Hollywood's golden age, fame was dazzling on the surface, but behind closed doors, it was bought at a devastating price. Legendary agent Henry Wilson once warned a young actor, "To be famous here, you have to give more than acting." It wasn't just a cruel joke. For many, it was the unspoken contract of survival. Rumors swirled of secret parties where names were replaced with numbers, where young hopefuls were offered roles only after giving themselves to powerful directors, producers, or journalists. Careers were launched not only by talent, but by silence, submission, and dangerous secrets locked away in drawers and vaults. Some actors endured sham marriages, others lived in fear of hidden tapes, and many drank or medicated themselves just to keep the mask from slipping. Tonight, we'll uncover the hidden stories of 15 actors who risked everything for the spotlight, and the shocking price they paid for glory. Marlon Brando. The dark deal behind the legend. Marlon Brando wasn't just a star, he was a storm. On screen, he radiated raw power. Off-screen, he played a far more dangerous game. In the late 1940s, Brando was broke, sleeping on benches in Greenwich Village, scrounging for bread. Then came George Cukor, the director whose Beverly Hills mansion doubled as Hollywood's most infamous gatehouse. Rumors say Brando wasn't invited to read lines. He was invited to warm a bed. Servants whispered he showed up nightly, no scripts in hand, only bottles of liquor and a locked door. The reward? A single phone call. Cukor introduced him to Elia Kazan, who cast Brando as Stanley Kowalski in A Streetcar Named Desire. Overnight, a legend was born. But Brando had already learned Hollywood's ugliest lesson. Success wasn't earned. It was bought, traded, and sometimes stolen in the shadows. He built his reputation not just on talent, but on intimacy with whoever held power, directors, producers, even journalists. Insiders swore he kept a secret black book filled with names that could make or break him, the same book that allegedly saved him from scandal in Las Vegas. To the public, he was the perfect family man, smiling beside wives and children. Behind closed doors, he disappeared at parties with powerful older men. And in 1975, he shocked the press by blurting out the truth. "I've slept with anyone who could give me a role, man or woman, so long as they had power." The room laughed nervously. But it wasn't a joke. It was Brando's confession, the scandalous price of immortality. James Dean, number 6 in Hollywood's secret ledger. James Dean is remembered as the rebel, a symbol of youth and freedom. But the truth behind his stardom is far darker. When Dean arrived in Los Angeles in 1952, he was just a broke farm boy, pockets nearly empty, sleeping in friends' hallways. It was desperation that made him an easy target for Hollywood's most sinister underworld, the after-hours parties at the Chateau Marmont. Behind those closed doors, actors weren't people. They were numbers. Dean's number was 6. Rumors say he was lured into a penthouse stocked with liquor, cameras, and powerful men. There, he was allegedly forced to perform for the camera, a tape that never surfaced but was whispered to haunt him until the end. Friends recalled finding him drunk, muttering, "I hate them, but I need them. Without them, I'm nobody." He became entangled with older mentors, Rogers Brackett, Clift and Webb, and even within Henry Wilson's notorious circle. His bond with Montgomery Clift was said to be more torment than comfort, mirroring Monty's own demons. Dean medicated his despair with alcohol, pills, and reckless speed. By 1955, Rebel Without a Cause had immortalized him, but his haunted eyes weren't acting. They reflected a boy chained by secrets. On September 30th, when his Porsche crashed fatally, whispers claimed Hollywood's grip had already killed him long before the car did. Rock Hudson. The mask that shattered. Rock Hudson was Hollywood's dream, 6'4", rugged, the image of masculine perfection. Women adored him, men admired him. But behind the smile, Hudson was trapped in a cage built by Henry Wilson, the infamous manager of pretty boys. His very first meeting with Wilson ended not with a handshake, but with a locked door. From that moment, Hudson belonged to Wilson and to the system. To protect their golden asset, Universal staged a life. Hudson was paraded beside Doris Day, Natalie Wood, and countless actresses. In 1955, he even married Phyllis Gates, Wilson's secretary. In her later memoir, Gates revealed, "He recoiled when he touched me. We both knew why we married. It was business." Off camera, Hudson lived in fear. Tabloids stalked him relentlessly, once catching him at Malibu hotels with male lovers. Rumors say Universal paid thousands to bury the photos. At parties, friends described him staring into mirrors, whispering, "They don't need me, they only need the mask." The mask finally cracked in 1985 when Hudson announced he was dying of AIDS. In one press conference, America's romantic idol collapsed into the truth. The image had been a lie. He died that same year at 59, mourned by millions. But to insiders, his story wasn't just a tragedy. It was proof that Hollywood could construct a man out of smoke, then let him suffocate behind it. Rudolph Valentino, the lover made in secret rooms. Rudolph Valentino, the first Latin lover, rose from poverty to become one of the most desired men of the 1920s. But behind his allure was a past scarred by exploitation. As a starving immigrant in New York, Valentino washed dishes, slept on kitchen chairs, and sometimes went hungry for days. Then came Mickey's Underground Club in Greenwich Village. By night, it looked like a jazz bar. Behind its velvet doors, it was a marketplace of flesh. Valentino, trembling and desperate, accepted $50 from a wealthy lawyer. That night bought food for a month, but also chained him to a cycle he could never escape. Rumors say he was kept in penthouses by powerful moguls, exchanging nights of submission for letters of recommendation. Doctors later admitted he begged for secrecy while treating STDs, whispering, "Please don't write down my name." Hollywood turned him into a god with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Women swooned, men copied his style. But insiders claimed Valentino never shook off the shadow of the men who once controlled him. At parties, when certain moguls entered, he dropped his gaze, terrified of the past they held over him. The press mocked him, calling him effeminate, a counterfeit rose. At just 31, he died suddenly of peritonitis. Whispers said a note in his apartment read, "The world calls me a lover. But that first night, I just lay there. No one kissed me." Valentino's legend was built on passion, but forged in pain. Tab Hunter, America's boy next door, in a gilded cage. Tab Hunter was sold to the public as the all-American dream, blonde, blue-eyed, smiling like the perfect son-in-law. But his career didn't begin with charm. It began with a police raid. In 1950, Los Angeles officers stormed a private gay party. Among the names on their list was a 19-year-old Hunter. One headline could have killed his career before it started. Strangely, the record vanished overnight. The next day, Warner Brothers signed him. Whispers say the arrest didn't end at the station. It ended in a producer's mansion where Hunter signed a deal he couldn't refuse. From then on, he belonged to Hollywood. The studio engineered romances to protect their asset. Magazines showed him with Natalie Wood, Grace Kelly, and Debbie Reynolds. In 1959, Life called him America's groom. Behind the curtain, Hunter was suffocating. He secretly loved Anthony Perkins of Psycho, but when Perkins suggested appearing together at a premiere, Hunter snapped, "If I'm outed, I lose everything. Will you lose it with me?" Their romance ended that night. Friends remembered him staring into mirrors, whispering, "They don't need me. They need the image they built." The mask devoured him. He battled insomnia, stomach issues, and crippling anxiety. Decades later, in his memoir, Hunter admitted, I wasn't chosen for acting. I was chosen for being beautiful and keeping quiet. The world saw America's boy next door. In reality, he was Hollywood's prisoner in a gilded cage. Montgomery Clift. Sad eyes born in a locked room. Montgomery Clift was hailed as one of the most gifted actors of his generation. On screen, his gaze pierced audiences with sorrow so deep it felt real. And maybe it was, because those eyes carried a secret born from his very first opportunity. In 1945, Clift was invited to director Joshua Logan's lavish estate in Westchester. It was famous for parties where contracts weren't earned. They were taken. A servant swore he saw Clift leaving Logan's room near dawn, eyes red, face streaked with tears, clutching a contract in his hand. From that moment, Clift's path was sealed. He soared to fame with a place in the sun, and from here to eternity, praised as a pioneer of method realism. But behind closed doors, he drowned pain with liquor. After a horrific 1956 car crash left his face disfigured, the spiral accelerated. He hurled bottles at mirrors, screaming, "This isn't me. This is the corpse they left behind." Addiction to alcohol and painkillers consumed him. Friends called his decline the slowest suicide in Hollywood. By 1966, at just 45, Clift was dead. The public remembered his sad eyes as artistry. Insiders whispered they were something darker, the permanent shadow of a locked room, and a price of fame he could never escape. Sal Mineo, the teen idol who knew too much. Sal Mineo burst onto screens in Rebel Without a Cause, stealing hearts as the sensitive, doomed teenager. But off-screen, his own story played like a tragedy, written by Hollywood itself. At just 16, Mineo was invited to a producer's mansion for what was billed as a private audition. A classmate later recalled he returned pale, with swollen red eyes, refusing to say a word. The next morning, his name appeared on the audition list. Overnight, Mineo was a star. But the spotlight came with chains. Whispers say he was passed among producers and executives, earning roles through submission rather than scripts. Journalists hinted at midnight castings, where contracts were written not in ink, but in flesh. By the 1970s, as his fame faded, Mineo grew reckless. He told friends he had photos, tapes, even letters that could bring down giants. In a 1976 interview, he teased, "If I disappear, go find them." Days later, he was stabbed outside his West Hollywood apartment. His wallet and watch were untouched. The only missing item was the leather briefcase he carried everywhere. Police called it robbery. Insiders called it a warning. Mineo's death at 37 remains one of Hollywood's most chilling mysteries. To the world, he was a beautiful, ill-fated teen idol. To those in power, he was a liability who knew far too much. Richard Chamberlain. 40 years behind a mask. In the 1960s, Richard Chamberlain was television's golden boy. As Dr. Kildare, he was America's trusted son-in-law, adored by millions of mothers. But his wholesome image was a carefully scripted lie. Behind the camera, Chamberlain was trapped in a silent prison for 4 decades. A former NBC employee revealed that Chamberlain was routinely summoned to sponsor parties in Beverly Hills. When the guests left and doors locked, powerful men chose their companions. Refusal wasn't an option. If Chamberlain resisted, the role that made him a star could be handed to someone else overnight. He lived with a secret romance, but when his partner begged to go public, Chamberlain's reply was cold. "If I lose my role for loving you, can you support me?" The answer ended their chance at freedom. Studios then staged fake girlfriends, Natalie Wood one night, Jane Fonda the next, convincing America he was the model man. Behind closed doors, he was consumed by anxiety. Friends described him rushing from parties, locking himself in hotel rooms, drinking until dawn. Sleepless nights became routine, pills his only escape. For 40 years, Chamberlain smiled for cameras while suffocating in silence. Only after retirement, when youth was gone and love long lost, did he finally admit the truth. I spent decades not being myself. By then, freedom had come too late. George Maharis, From Idol to Ghost. George Maharis exploded into fame with Route 66, his rugged looks and restless spirit captivating America. Millions tuned in weekly to watch him roam highways. Magazines crowned him one of the 10 most attractive men alive. But in 1967, his entire career vanished overnight. On November 7th, headlines blared, "Route 66 star arrested for lewd conduct." Police claimed they caught him with another man in a Westwood hotel restroom. To the public, it was scandal. To Hollywood insiders, it looked like a hit job. Rumors swirled that CBS itself orchestrated the sting. Maharis had demanded higher pay, resisted brutal shooting schedules, and most dangerously, refused to keep attending secret parties arranged for network executives. A Variety columnist hinted his arrest wasn't bad luck, it was retaliation. Maharis had once played along. Friends recalled him confessing, "If I endure a few nights, I can trade them for a season." But when he stopped obeying, the protection ended. After the arrest, directors erased his name from casting lists within days. Whispers say he held evidence, letters, photos, tapes that could topple powerful men. But after one mysterious phone call, he fell silent. He vanished from the spotlight, living the rest of his life in obscurity. From TV idol to ghost, George Maharis became a warning. One false move against the system, and Hollywood erases you. Farley Granger, the naive boy who traded love for roles. When Alfred Hitchcock cast Farley Granger in Rope, 1948, audiences saw a fresh, sensitive young man destined for stardom. What they didn't see was the secret deal shaping his life. At just 22, Granger fell into the arms of playwright Arthur Lawrence, author of West Side Story. Their relationship lasted 15 years, equal parts romance and contract. Lawrence controlled him completely. Which roles to accept, which parties to attend, even who to sit beside at cocktail gatherings. A mutual friend recalled, Farley wanted to refuse a role, but Arthur forced him. He cried, but obeyed. Granger later admitted in his memoir, "Arthur taught me how to love, how to pretend, and how to lie down when a role needed keeping." On set, whispers spread. During Strangers on a Train, 1951, an assistant joked, "He must have slept with someone to get here." Days later, the man vanished from production. No one dared mention it again. Though Hitchcock favored him, Granger never escaped suspicion. To peers and public, talent was overshadowed by rumor that he climbed by lying in bed, not by acting. He continued to work, but never reached A-list immortality. Late in life, Granger confessed bitterly, "If you don't let them touch your body, you'll never touch the spotlight." It was both epitaph and indictment, a career built not only on art, but on compromise written into his soul. Anthony Perkins, psycho star with a hidden script. Anthony Perkins terrified the world as Norman Bates in Psycho, but off-screen he lived a different kind of horror. From the start of his career, Perkins was caught between desire and survival. He longed for authenticity, but Hollywood demanded masks. Whispers swirled about his romance with fellow actor Tab Hunter. They met at a Malibu party and for a brief time dared to dream of being public. But Perkins was under studio control. When Hunter suggested appearing together at a premiere, Perkins shut him down. "If we're outed, we're finished." Their love ended in silence. Studios arranged fake dates with actresses, while Perkins lived in secret, often sneaking into back entrances of hotels to meet lovers. Friends described him as painfully shy, crippled by guilt instilled by a system that punished honesty. To protect his career, Perkins married Barry Berenson in 1973. They had 2 children, and the marriage offered a public shield. But insiders claimed his true self never disappeared. He carried the weight of double lives until the end. In 1992, Perkins died of AIDS-related complications. He never publicly came out. Only later did his story emerge, a man who gave the world one of cinema's most chilling performances while privately enduring a lifetime of repression. Perkins's tragedy proves that even a star who embodied madness on screen was forced to play an even crueler role off-screen, pretending he was someone he could never be. Dirk Bogarde, Britain's secret leading man. Dirk Bogarde was Britain's answer to Cary Grant. Suave, sophisticated, the perfect matinee idol. Audiences adored his roles in The Servant and Death in Venice. Yet behind the glamour, Bogarde lived in shadows. Rumors tied him to actor-manager Anthony Forwood, his supposed companion. Forwood moved into Bogarde's house, traveled with him, and effectively lived as his partner. But the press was forbidden to print what everyone whispered. Instead, they painted Forwood as a loyal friend, ignoring the truth that they were a couple in everything but name. Bogarde never married. When asked, he gave evasive answers, once telling a reporter, "Some men aren't meant for domesticity." Insiders say his bachelorhood was less choice, more survival. Studios feared scandal could sink their star. As years passed, Bogarde turned to more daring roles that reflected his repressed reality. In Death in Venice, critics noted the uncanny authenticity in his portrayal of forbidden longing. They didn't know he was living it. Privately, he battled anxiety and isolation. Forwood later became ill, and Bogarde devoted himself to caring for him until his death. By then, Bogarde had finally hinted at the truth, confessing in late interviews that he had lived against the grain of society. Dirk Bogarde's story wasn't just about talent, it was about endurance. A man forced to hide the greatest truth of his life, even while embodying it on screen with haunting power. Cary Grant, Hollywood's handsome secret. Cary Grant was Hollywood royalty, charming, witty, the man every woman wanted. Yet for decades, whispers followed him, not about his marriages, but about his life with fellow actor Randolph Scott. The two shared a beachfront home dubbed Bachelor Hall, where they were photographed sunbathing, cooking, and lounging together like newlyweds. Studios panicked. Grant was one of their most valuable stars, and the idea of a gay leading man was unthinkable. Publicists rushed to stage romances and arranged marriages. Grant wed 5 times, each union splashed across magazines, but none lasted. Reporters hinted at the truth with sly jokes about his unconventional domestic arrangements. Grant fought back fiercely, suing publications for libel. Yet the rumors persisted, fueled by photos of him and Scott laughing like lovers. Friends described him as torn between desire and image. He loved Scott deeply, but Hollywood demanded denial. At parties, he played the perfect gentleman for the cameras, then slipped quietly back home to Bachelor Hall. Grant's career soared in films like North by Northwest and Charade. To audiences, he was the ultimate ladies' man. But to insiders, he was also a man locked in a lifelong balancing act, protecting an image while hiding a truth. Cary Grant died in 1986, still insisting on privacy. His story endures not just as the tale of a star, but as proof that even Hollywood's most perfect man lived under imperfect lies. Ramon Novarro, the Latin lover who died in blood. When Rudolph Valentino died, Hollywood crowned Ramon Novarro as the next Latin lover. Handsome, devoutly Catholic in public, Novarro became MGM's shining star through the 1920s. But his off-screen life was a carefully guarded secret. Behind closed doors, Novarro lived as a gay man in constant fear. The studio painted him as a bachelor saint, parading him in church pews and society pages while silencing rumors of lovers. In truth, he struggled with shame and secrecy, drifting into clandestine affairs that could never be acknowledged. In later years, tabloids whispered about his encounters with male escorts, describing him as lonely, isolated, and vulnerable. That vulnerability proved fatal. In 1968, at age 69, Novarro hired 2 young men for the company. Instead of companionship, they beat him to death in his Hollywood Hills home, believing he had hidden money stashed away. The murder shocked the world. Newspapers sensationalized the scene, focusing less on his career and more on his sexuality. What MGM once concealed now exploded across headlines. To the public, Novarro had been a romantic idol, but his brutal death exposed the truth. Hollywood's Latin lover was never free to live as himself. Even in death, he was betrayed by the mask that the system forced him to wear. George Nader, the star who took the fall for Rock Hudson. George Nader had the looks, the charm, and the talent to rival any leading man of the 1950s. For a moment, it seemed he was destined for greatness, but in Hollywood's shadow games, he became collateral damage. Nader was a close friend and rumored lover of Rock Hudson. When Confidential magazine prepared to expose Hudson, studio bosses scrambled. To protect their golden boy, they allegedly sacrificed Nader, feeding the press just enough to redirect suspicion. Almost overnight, Nader's opportunities dried up. Whispers say he had already played the game in Hollywood's private circles, attending Palm Springs parties where powerful men picked companions like wine. But unlike Hudson, Nader lacked a studio willing to spend millions covering his tracks. Exiled from top roles, he was sent to Europe, where scandal mattered less. There, he lived quietly with his lifelong partner, Mark Miller. Insiders claimed his silence was purchased, his career sidelined so Hudson could continue unscathed. Though he never achieved Hudson's superstardom, Nader found peace later in life, publishing a science fiction novel and living openly in his final decades. Yet his story remains a chilling reminder. Hollywood protected one man by erasing another. Fame has always carried a price, but in Hollywood's golden age, that price was often unbearable. Behind the dazzling smiles and red carpet romances, many of the industry's brightest stars were trapped in cages, forced into silence, coerced into submission, and made to live double lives. Some endured sham marriages, others drank themselves into oblivion. A few, like Sal Mineo or Ramon Novarro, paid with their lives. Even those who survived, like Tab Hunter or Richard Chamberlain, confessed decades later that the image people adored was never truly them. The lesson is clear. When truth is silenced, humanity is lost. The studios built legends by controlling love, identity, and even the bodies of their actors, but they also left scars that never healed. These stories remind us that talent alone should define greatness, not the willingness to endure humiliation or hide who you are. Today, the world is different. Stars can live more openly, though the pressures of fame remain. By remembering what these 15 actors endured, we honor not just their performances, but their resilience. And we're reminded that the greatest role anyone can play is not a part on screen, but themselves.